"Come in," he says, holding open the door. I don't move. I went into the barn, but this place has even more of an inside feeling to it. The floor is made of wood instead of good dirt, and I don't think there are any holes in the ceiling for light to come through. I imagine being squashed and surrounded by the walls. Surrounded by the walls like the dead bird inside the egg. Tell your story out here. He shrugs. Stay by the door if you want. I'm going to have some bread and milk. He goes through the door, but I stay where I am, peering in. Everything is carved and twisty, even things that could be straight, like chairs and table legs. Little animals made of wood are everywhere, on the table, in the corners above the fireplace. I see rabbits and ducks and birds and deer. I want to go and pick up each one, but I don't. The man people cuts 2 thick slices from a loaf of bread, then drips honey on them from a pot that looks like a bear. He comes back to the door and hands one to me. A man and a woman lived here once. Their names were William and Hagar. He faces one of the twisty chairs to me and sits down. I lean against the doorway and lick the honey from my bread. They were wood carvers, as you can see. They made this place. All the villagers warned them that this is a fairy forest, but they thought they knew all the tricks to keep themselves safe. They hung daisies on their door. They scattered iron in the grass and hung horseshoes on the windows. On Midsummer's Eve, they made a big ring of salt all around. After a few years of never seeing a fairy, they thought they had nothing to worry about. They even began to think that maybe fairies were just a story. The man people pours 2 cups of milk, but he does not bring one to me. He just leaves it on the table, in the place closest to the door. I have finished my bread and milk would be the perfect thing to wash it down. Then they had a child. He looked at me, a boy named Nicholas. He drinks this cup of milk and makes a sound as if it is the best milk he's ever tasted. Nicholas loved the forest, the man people goes on. He was always wandering off, even though they didn't believe in fairies. William and Hagar kept him safe with daisy chains and were sure to keep him inside on Midsummer's Eve. The man people cuts another piece of bread and drips some honey onto it. Have some more if you like. He puts the bread on the table next to the milk. I want that piece of bread and honey. I want that milk. They had another child, another little boy. I put one toe through the door. Nothing terrible happens. After all, it's not a ring of salt. I creep forward. The floor is very flat against my bare feet. The creaking sound it makes is exactly the sound of a tree creaking in the wind. The man people looks at me and I feel trapped by his eyes, but I don't run away. Nicholas was good to his baby brother, or so I've heard. What was his name? I asked. The new one. Jonathan, the man people says. Nicholas and Jonathan. I feel as if I have heard those names somewhere before. One Midsummer's Eve, little Jonathan caught a cold. His parents were very worried. They didn't watch the older boy the way they should have. They didn't make him a daisy chain to keep the fairies away. For years after, they regretted that. I edge closer to the table. It's strange to have a ceiling above my head. It feels like it's pressing down on me, so I keep my eyes on the floor and don't look up at it. I reach the bread and push it all the way into my mouth, taking the cup back to the door. Nicholas was stolen away that Midsummer's Eve. By the time Hagar and William got to the meadow, the fairies had already gone back to the summer country, taking their son with them. This must have happened a long time ago, I think, because I've never seen a boy in the summer country. The queen would have gotten tired of him after a while, I say with my mouth full, thinking of the singer with the fiery red hair. So William and Hagar thought, the man people says, but it never happened. Every Midsummer's Eve they would try to find the fairy meadow to beg for their child. Try to find, I say, but it's easy. I've been there lots of times. The man people shakes his head. He cuts more bread for me, leaving it on the table. I come and get it, dripping my own honey onto it from the bare pot. You see, every Midsummer's Eve the fairies would play tricks on William and Hagar. Sometimes mysterious lights would lead them from the path. Sometimes they'd hear Nicholas crying, and they'd chase the sound all night, getting more and more lost. Music from the fairy meadow seemed to come from one direction, then another. I nod. We fairies do love tricks. Once the fairy queen even made a life-size doll out of leaves and twigs held together with magic. She left it in the front of the cottage on Midsummer's Eve. William and Hagar were sure it was their Nicholas come back to them until dawn came and the doll fell apart in their arms. The honey is too sweet in my mouth, all of a sudden, and the bread is hard to swallow. No, I say, no, I don't believe that. The good queen is not so cruel. The man people only looks at me with sad eyes. I imagine my fairy friends laughing at the prank and calling William and Hagar stupid peoples. Maybe some of the other fairies, I say, but not the queen. All their lives, William and Hagar waited for Nicholas, the man people say. They always had hope. They even thought he might still be a child when he came back. Time is a strange thing in the summer country. That's true, I think. The singer with the fiery red hair only spent a few years in the summer country, but when he came home, the girl he had left behind was a white-haired old woman, and everyone else he knew was dead and gone. Did William and Hagar die? I asked quietly. The man people nods, and their oldest son, Jonathan, grew up and went away to become a sailor. He runs a hand over his head, and he got older and lost his hair. And then he came back. He smiles, waiting for me to understand. Oh, I say, is that you? Are you Jonathan? I am, he says. And Nix, I think you are my older brother, Nicholas.